Sometimes likes to pretend that it doesn't really exist or it doesn't really impact on people. I profoundly disagree, and that was true this morning in the discussions we had. It has a huge impact on people.
This government needs to realise it's never been hungry since World War II. They're going to be hungry.
And I took the decision that we would take the hard decisions first. I think anybody who's turned around, I don't know, an organisation or a business.
Did you know that Keir Starmer claims his $3 million inheritance tax threshold means the vast majority of farms are completely unaffected? It's a statement that sounds reassuring until you hear from the farmers themselves. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. In a live radio interview, caller after caller challenged Starmer's figures, exposing a stark disconnect between Labour's policies and the realities of rural life. The result? A political showdown that revealed more about Starmer's leadership than any campaign speech ever could.
Oh, it's hard. I mean, governing is hard, and we inherited a lot of problems, an economy that was broken, NHS on its knees, and we've had to pick that up and deal with it.
Everything we're doing, it is for our kids. It's their future.
And I took the decision that we would take the hard decisions first. I think anybody who's turned around, I don't know, an organisation or a business.
Keir Starmer's local radio tour was supposed to be a routine affair, a chance to connect with voters and promote Labour's policies. But what unfolded was anything but ordinary. As Starmer settled into the studio, little did he know that a group of everyday farmers was about to turn his carefully crafted narrative on its head. The first caller set the tone. A local farmer challenged Starmer's assertion that the $3 million inheritance tax threshold would leave the vast majority of farms completely unaffected. The caller's voice trembled with frustration as he explained how land values and assets in rural areas often exceeded this figure, putting many family farms at risk. As more callers joined the fray, the tension in the studio became palpable. Starmer's reassurances about the tax's limited impact were met with a barrage of real-world examples that painted a very different picture. Farmers spoke of generations of hard work potentially undone by a policy that seemed disconnected from rural realities. The disconnect between Starmer's assertions and the farmers' experiences grew wider with each call. While Starmer clung to his prepared statements, the callers brought raw emotion and lived experience to the debate. They spoke of sleepless nights worrying about the future of their farms, of children who might be forced to sell land their families had worked for centuries. Research backs up the farmers' concerns. The proposed tax changes fail to account for the complex nature of farm assets, where high land values don't necessarily translate to liquid wealth. Many farms operate on tight margins, and the threat of a hefty inheritance tax bill could force families to break up their holdings just to pay the taxman. As the interview progressed, listeners could sense a shift in the atmosphere. Starmer's confident demeanor began to crack under the weight of the farmer's testimony. It was clear that this was more than just a policy disagreement. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of rural life and the challenges faced by farming communities. The pivotal moment came when Martha Hayes, a Lincolnshire farmer, took to the airwaves. Her voice steady and determined.
They swapped the fields for the seafront of Llandudno to try to drive their point home.
Sometimes likes to pretend that it doesn't really exist or it doesn't really impact on people. I profoundly disagree, and that was true this morning in the discussions we had. It has a huge impact on people.
I'm just so emotional. Why do we as farmers have to do this? We shouldn't.
She demanded an independent review of the policy's impact on farming families. It was a moment that encapsulated the entire debate, a citizen holding a political leader to account, demanding transparency and fairness. As the interview drew to a close, it was clear that this confrontation had wider implications. Starmer's stumbles on the radio weren't just about inheritance tax. They revealed a deeper disconnect between Labour's leadership and a significant portion of the electorate. The question now is, how will this public reckoning shape the future of British politics and the relationship between leaders and the communities they serve? While Starmer's radio stumble was just the tip of the iceberg, a much larger controversy was brewing behind the scenes. How does $730,000 in undeclared donations fit into the picture of Labour's leadership? Starmer's rise to power was marked by 10 key pledges that formed the cornerstone of his leadership campaign. These promises, ranging from workers' rights to climate change action, were meant to unify the party and appeal to a broad spectrum of voters. However, as time has passed, these pledges have crumbled one by one, leaving a trail of broken promises in their wake. The contrast between Starmer's campaign rhetoric and his current positions is stark. Take his stance on workers' rights, for instance. Once a vocal supporter of strong protections, Starmer has since shifted towards more centrist policies that have left many of his initial supporters feeling betrayed. This pattern of inconsistency extends to other key issues, including climate change and internal party reforms. But it's not just about policy shifts. Starmer's handling of specific situations has raised eyebrows and eroded public trust. His approach to cuts in the winter fuel allowance, for example, has been criticized as politically motivated rather than genuinely addressing economic concerns. Critics argue that these cuts disproportionately affect vulnerable populations, particularly the elderly, contradicting Starmer's earlier promises to protect the most vulnerable in society. The impact of these broken promises on public trust cannot be overstated.
This government needs to realise it's never been hungry since World War II. They're going to be hungry.
And everything is just going against it. This inheritance tax it's ridiculous. It's the final straw.
Because if they keep putting tax on the farmers, it's going to have a massive impact.
Experts suggest that Starmer's failure to maintain consistency in his pledges could lead to long-term damage to voter engagement and trust in the Labour Party. This erosion of trust isn't just a problem for Starmer or Labour, it contributes to a broader cynicism about politics that threatens the very foundations of democratic participation. As we dig deeper into Starmer's credibility issues, a more troubling picture emerges. The Labour Together funding scandal revealed that over $730,000 in undeclared donations were used to support Starmer's leadership campaign. This secretive group, linked to efforts to restore the Labour right and undermine the previous leadership's principles, raises serious questions about the transparency and integrity of Starmer's rise to power. The Electoral Commission's investigation found Labour Together guilty of more than 20 breaches of electoral law, including failures to declare significant donations. This lack of accountability not only casts a shadow over Starmer's leadership, but also raises broader concerns about the integrity of the UK's electoral process. As we consider the implications of these revelations, we're left wondering, what does this pattern of dishonesty and shifting positions mean for the future of British democracy? How can voters trust a system where leaders can rise to power through undeclared funding and abandoned promises? The state of political accountability in the UK is at a critical juncture. Keir Starmer's radio reckoning and the Labour Together funding controversy have exposed deep-seated issues in our democratic system. These incidents aren't isolated. They're symptoms of a broader problem where leaders can rise to power through undeclared funding and abandoned promises. So where do we go from here? Can British democracy survive in an era of eroding public trust and political doublespeak? The answer lies in our hands as citizens. We must demand greater transparency, hold our leaders to account, and refuse to accept hollow promises or backroom deals. It's time for a new era of political scrutiny. We need to question, challenge, and investigate, not just during election seasons, but every day. Only through persistent vigilance can we hope to rebuild trust in our democratic institutions and ensure that our leaders truly serve the people they represent.